Right, Bahr's rule. Pause the video, white to play. What would you do? Now, I'm pretty sure I've mentioned quite a lot that I'm a big fan of this book. I think it's a very hard book, but I think it's brilliant. So, sort of by implication, I'm a big fan of the author as well. I think it's a really good book. I've not got any of his other books, but I understand he's highly regarded as arguably the best Russian chess trainer of all time. So, pretty good. But I don't agree with his description of Bahr's rule. He basically says that he doesn't like it. He just kind of says, "Oh well, it's no good to us." He says something like it's no good for our purposes, and then proceeds to sort of give his own version of the rule, which is really just, as far as I can tell, a different version of the same rule, and arguably written in a much more convoluted way. Now, I don't know whose rule I'm actually using by the end of it all, because I've read the sort of the convoluted section by Dvoretsky, and it's good. I just don't think there was anything wrong with Bahr's rule in the first place. So I don't know whose rule I'm using, but I know that in this position, I think I've got this particular topic down to. I think I've got it sussed basically, and I know in this position that the only move that White doesn't want to play, excuse me, is G4. White has 3 legal moves, and the one that messes it up is G4. So whoever's rule it is, Bahr's rule or Dvoretsky's long paragraph explaining why we shouldn't use Bahr's rule and we should sort of follow his list of instructions, it's all about when you've got rook's pawns facing each other on one side of the board, and whether the attacking side that has an extra passed pawn on the other side of the board can basically use that passed pawn to all you're trying to do ultimately. I mean, by the way, if you're in a sort of a winning position anyway, let's just play some silly moves here just to sort of demonstrate what I'm talking about. Like this is just a win for White anyway. We don't really care about these pawns over here. We've just we've reached the key squares. So that's the first thing to say. We don't need Bahr's rule for that. But assuming that you can't do that, so if White carries on pushing the pawn up the other end of the board, Black's going to do the sort of always move straight back mantra at the end, and White's going to either get a stalemate or have to give up the G pawn and come over here and win the A pawn. And it's all about whether Black can reach the crucial square C8. Now, whether you know Bahr's rule or not, whether you understand Bahr's rule, it's just a no-brainer that you want to keep your pass pawn as far down the board as possible, and your rook's pawn that's going to get blocked as far up the board as possible. And the same for the defending side. They want to get their blocked rook's pawn as far up the board as possible. And they really want to do everything they can to entice White's pawn forward. That's the best drawing chances. But there is a line, a literal line that we're about to draw, which is what Bahr's rule is all about. And that line is, what you do is you start from the defending side's bishop's pawn. You do a diagonal back to the bishop file. The defending side's rook's pawn. You do a diagonal back to the bishop file, reflect it, and then draw this line. If the white pawn has crossed that line, which it hasn't, it's a draw. And if the white pawn hasn't crossed that line, then White can win it. Now, it's not quite as simple as that in the sense that you can see that at some point White can just sort of make a run for this A pawn, and when they do, the black pawn's going to come in and take on G3, and then it's all about whether the black king can get to C8. If for some bizarre reason, and we could actually do it with this position, the black king was actually one tempo further away, then the white pawn will have been able to afford to cross that line. Okay, so there's your bars rule. That's the line, and it's just a case of like, well, let's say white plays a silly move. That's messed up the game. G4. But I'm just going to do both sides doing some silly moves now, but without the opposition thing going on. So I'm going to let black have the opposition. Let's go there. King h7. King h5, king h7. King g5. King g7. So without the rook's pawns, this is just a draw. White to play as a draw. Here's your bars rule diagonal. The white pawn has crossed it by 1 square. So they've messed it up. That's a draw. Except it's not a draw because that 1 tempo they've lost with the pawn crossing the line, they've just got back after I've played all their silly moves, because when white now makes a run for the a pawn, the black king's going to take longer to get to the g pawn. So I mean, let's just see that now. So I don't think black can't make a run for it already. You see, black's got to carry on maintaining the opposition, and then white just makes a run for it, and you'll see that white wins this just. Black's going to try and get to c8. Doesn't work. So the first thing of Bahr's rule, and Dvoretsky sort of agrees on this, is that if the attacking side's pawn has crossed the 4th rank, it's a win, and you can forget drawing diagonals. It's just a win, and white just makes a run for it. So that's the first thing to note. I'm trying to think actually, well, you could just make a run for it there. You probably can't actually. Probably need to allow one more. I think I did some messing, wasting time a little bit there, but it's just a win because we're too far advanced already. So that's the first thing. That's just a win. Okay. After that, it's really just a case of counting looking at the line and seeing if there's any sort of tempi saved by white on that on that line. I mean, Dvoretsky talks about everything in terms of this diagonal, and then he kind of has a point system where he gives black. Is it that diagonal he talks about? Sorry, I think he talks about this diagonal. He talks about that diagonal, and then he gives black 1 point for each pawn move further on from there. So that black would get 1 point in that line because they've gone one further than a5. But if you think about it, if we're always looking at this diagonal, but we get 1 point for being on a4, that's just the same as that. It's the same thing. So I think it's just an elaborate point system that's just unnecessary. So you're white to play. Is it a win? Well, there's your rook's pawn. Reflect off the bishop file. The g pawn hasn't crossed that line. There are no extra tempi involved, but it is a win, and white wins it by just doing anything other than pushing the g pawn. So we got king g1, I don't know, king g3, king f1. What could black play? King g4. Should we go king f2? We could probably make a run for it already there, actually. Oh yeah, I think we can make a run for it already, but I think I just wasted a move there, didn't I? I could have just gone king e2, king g3 straight away. And the black king's going to try and desperately going to try and get to, excuse me, c8. Not happening. And has white got to be careful there? Don't think so. No, win. I'm wondering if it's worth. Yeah, and the same idea that I guess what I've already talked about. As soon as the g pawn moves, if white played this blunder here, that's it. They've thrown away the win because the black king will now be able to get to c8. The only way that white could now win that is if they somehow get one extra tempo by being in front of the g pawn, so the black king takes one extra move to capture it. So yeah, so black would have to just play some silly moves really. Let's go here. I'm going to make white play some silly moves as well. Let's go king g6. Now, obviously, that wins the game anyway without the h pawns, without the rook's pawns. But let's. I mean, that would be a horrendous blunder if we didn't have the rook's pawns on the board, because you've just given black the opposition. But it doesn't matter, because again, we can just make a run for the rook's pawns. I think I've pretty much already covered that. So yeah, that's that position sorted. What about this position? Pause the video. White to play. Is it a win? Is it a draw? What do you reckon? See if you can apply Bahr's rule to decide. So here's the rook's pawn, back to the bishop file, reflect. There's the line. The white pawn has crossed that line by 2. So it's like you're 2 tempi off being able to win it. You get one of them back because you're one square in front of your pawn, so that's your 1 extra tempo, but it's not enough. Again, Dvoretsky would talk about this diagonal. He'd give black 1 point for the white pawn having crossed it, 1 point for that black pawn not being on a5, and then 1 point back to white for the extra tempo in front of the pawn. So it's 2-1 to black. But again, you can see it's the same thing. You know, this diagonal from Bahr's rule as compared to this diagonal and 1 point is just the same scoring system. So I reckon Bahr's rule is just simpler. Always do this diagonal, and then all you have to worry about after that is extra. Has white got an extra tempo over on the king side? I don't even think you have to worry about white having an extra 2 tempi, because if they've got an extra 2 tempi, if they're 2 squares in front of the pawn, they're on one of the key squares. It's a win. We don't care about the rook's pawns. It's just a win. So I think that's irrelevant as well. Right, have a go at this one. Pause the video. Black to play. What's going on in terms of Bahr's rule, and what would you do? There's a few things to talk about actually with rook's pawns. There's like an amendment to the rule, if you like, that needs discussing. I mean, Bahr's rule still just applies. There's your diagonal. Rook's pawn back to the bishop's file, reflect. The h pawn hasn't crossed it. So that's going to be a win. Except that the white king is on the h file. So what black can do here to draw this is they can play king f4, box the white king onto the h file, and the only thing that white can do to get out of that is to move the h pawn, basically. So black will just sort of keep the white pawn boxed in on the h file. White has to push the h pawn, but you've just crossed the diagonal. So black will now play king f5. If white plays king h5 here, trying to stay in front of the pawn, you just come back to f4, and the white king can't come out this way because the pawn gets lost immediately. In fact, we probably should just see that anyway and just count out the moves. But we can see that the black guy, it's not even close, is it? The black king's easily going to get to the c8 square. So yeah, the white king doesn't go that way. The white king has to come back to h4, and then the only way white can make progress is to come out this way. And again, you're going to get to c8. I mean, you can play it out if you want to, but we're going to get the black king to c8 with 1 move to spare. And there it is, just in time. It's worth doing a bit more with this rook's pawn, actually. So in that position I just looked at, we ended up down here. So if it's that position with black to move, you're okay. because you've got this king back to f4 trick, and the white king can't come out this way. If the white pawn though is still on its starting square, so let's just do a silly move by black. I've just realised this isn't going to work. The thing I'm trying to demonstrate, because these pawns need to be one rank further down this way. But it's I'll show you anyway, because it's worth seeing. Let's say that black does let's say black plays king f3, and white goes king h3, which they were both silly moves, and black's going to try the same trick. So king f4, king h4, king back to f3. And before we said the white king can't come out that way because the black king will come in here and win the pawn. But when the pawn's on its starting square, that's not the case. King there, h4, and obviously white's won. Now all of that's kind of irrelevant anyway, because by playing silly moves, the the black king had actually let the white king out, and this white pawn hadn't crossed the diagonal from Bahr's rule. So I now need to go and set up that position where the black pawn's on a4, so that it looks like it's a draw because the white h pawn has crossed that diagonal, but actually it's a win if the king's in front of the pawn and black's forced to move because of the h pawn being on that starting square. So I'm just going to pause my recording and set that position up, which I haven't set up yet. So yeah, this is the position I was talking about. If you move everything on the chessboard one rank further up, it's a draw, as we've just seen. The king being in front of the rook's pawn, this is something that Dvoretsky describes very well in my view. The king being in front of the rook's pawn is the same as the king being by the side of a normal pawn in just what he calls the normal position. So the white pawn has crossed the diagonal of Bahr's rule, which means that it's a draw. But if it's black's to move, with the position being at this rank, then white's got the extra trick up their sleeve with the h pawn being on the starting square. So black would play king f4. If white comes to g2, that is just a draw from what we just talked about. So white has to go for the extra trick. In fact, we could see that, to be honest. Let's just play through that, and you'll see that the black king is going to get to c8. Okay, so that's a draw. But the extra trick that white has up their sleeve that they didn't have if the rook's pawn wasn't on its starting square is they can come out this way. Well, and black's just completely stuffed there, aren't they? Because in fact, what would black have to do there? They'd they can't even play king f3, can they? It's that bad. They can't even play king f3. So after king h4, they'd have to come back to f5. Oh, there you go. So now that's where the extra tempos come from, because now white can come and step in front of their one rank in front of their pawn. So our pawn is one rank ahead of the diagonal of Bahr's rule, but we get that lost point back by our king being one rank in front of the pawn. So yeah, that's what that's all about. Right, where do we got to? We've seen that one. I suppose you could pause the video here, white to play, and just decide, is it a win? Is it a draw? What do you reckon? Here's the diagonal from the defending side's rook's pawn. Back to the bishop's file, reflect. White pawn has crossed that line, so that's like 1 point down, but the white king is in front of the pawn, so it's a win. And you get that point back. I mean, the king being in front of the pawn is a bit like that pawn hadn't crossed the diagonal after all, and you can play it out if you really want to. We're just going to make a run for the. Oh, I did something wrong there. What did I do wrong there? Oh, yeah. If the black king goes to g5, then you play king e5, winning in the normal position. Yeah, so, sorry, black has to maintain the opposition. I think I did that right earlier on in this video. What an idiot. Yeah, the black king is not getting to c8. Done. So I mean that's the rule. Sort of hopefully learn inside out. I certainly think I'm happy with it personally. I'm more than confident I could apply it in a game. So hopefully you are too. Anyone watching this, and let's see how it might have actually come up in a game. There's a couple of games where it's come up in the Dvoretsky book, and a couple of studies which are always good fun. So in this position here is just completely drawn, but black tries this f3 move, just sort of trying to trick white basically. So it's white to play. What would you do here using your knowledge of Bahr's rule if necessary? In the game, white played g takes f3 check. Black played king h3, and white actually just resigned there because they suddenly realised they were lost. I mean, the game might continue king e3, king g3. Now remember, if the black pawn gets to f4, we can forget about Bahr's rule. We don't care about the rook's pawns. You know, if the black pawn's on f4, these are the three key squares, and black has won. So white has to play f4. And then black plays king g4. And again, forget about the rook's pawns. When black plays king takes f4, white needs to be ready to play king f2. Otherwise, black wins this. We don't care about the rook's pawns. So white has to be ready to play king f2. We get the taking, king f2. But then if you think about Bahr's rule, the defending side's rook's pawn back to the bishop's file. There's your diagonal. And the black pawn hasn't crossed that diagonal. So white's lost. So back in this position, what you needed to do was play g3. And that forces the black f-pawn forwards. I guess otherwise we've got a mine square situation. That's trivially drawn, isn't it? If black allows king takes f3. f4 takes. There's your diagonal. We're smashing it as a draw. Okay, that f3 pawn has crossed that line by 2. The white king is easily going to take on f3 and make its way to c1. So yeah, that was from a game from 1994 between two players whose ratings were both much higher than mine, I presume. I presume most of the games in that book are from sort of title players and so on. And yeah, they've sort of messed that up. So that was that. There's some good studies, both from, I've got two studies here, both 1935 and both from Bahr himself. So it's black to play. Pause the video and decide what you would do here as black. So the first thing is that as the defending side, if your locked rook's pawn, your blocked rook's pawn, sorry, is not as far as the 4th rank, you've lost. That was rule number 1 of Bahr's rule. So if we end up with white having an extra h pawn, that's white's passed pawn, and then these are the locked pawns on the queen side, black's lost. They've got to engineer it so that it's the h pawn. It's the a pawn that black wants to lose, basically. So they're going to do that and then sort of try and we've got to force white to take the a pawn. We've got to protect our h pawn as black. That's the important bit. And yeah, the way you do it is that you sort of, I mean, white's got the opposition, so you have to cede the opposition. If you think about you know, the central axis running through some key squares or whatever, but you give way on the side that you don't want white to go. Like, we need to force white towards the a6 pawn. So it's a bit counterintuitive, isn't it? You've got to give up one of these two pawns because white's got the opposition. So you wouldn't necessarily think to give up the one that's where their pawn's an even closer to queening, but you do want to do that. You know, remember that the further up the board your passed pawn on the side with the on the other side of the blocked rook's pawns, you want that to win it. You need that to be as far down the board as possible. So black plays king e7, and white, you know, the opposition on the f file thankfully wasn't a thing, because okay, white's forced you off the f file, but now can't make progress to g4. The white king would come to e3, and then absolutely crucial, if we consider this as the central axis of the opposition, we're going to give way. We've got to let white make progress this way. If we give way in such a way that white makes progress that way, we've had it. So we go back to f7, and this is the bit where, you know, on the opposition video, I talk about, okay, so what are you doing with this opposition? It's like, well, hey, I've got the opposition, you know, let's have a party. You've got the opposition. It's like, what are you doing with your opposition? It's like, you know, you had the opposition, well done. You forced black to move to f7. Now make progress. Now come in. But black wants you to go in that way. They've sort of realised that the rook's pawn, one of their rook's pawns, is going to go. And you still have to maintain the opposition that stops white coming and collecting this pawn. So you have to play king f6. And we just keep white out, basically. I mean, I think if white plays king e4, it completely messes up, because I don't think it's going to get either of our two pawns then. But white can make a run for the a pawn. I mean, I suppose you could always count out moves, but it's a rook's pawn versus a rook's pawn. So if you come and snatch here, I think you're going to be in big trouble. What's that? 1, 2, 3, out the way, and then 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're in big trouble if you go for a race. So you're going to have to play. I thought you'd have to play king e5. Actually, you can still get away with king e7, but king e5 seems the sort of the principled move where you're really making your plans clear now. He's like, you stay over there, please, Mr. White King. I don't know, what does white do? They might try and mess around a bit, and eventually they think, okay, I've got nothing better to come and take this pawn. There's your defending pawn. Back to the bishop's file. There's the reflection. It's not even close. That's an easy draw. We'll see this. We'll see king here. I guess black just keeps keeping white boxed in. And king here, you go king c6 was fine as well there, but king c8. I'm just going to do this all day. Eventually, white has to win the opposition, and then we can just, you've got to be a bit careful here. You can't come to c6. They would have to play king c8, king b6, and yeah, white makes a run for it, I suppose, but this is not even close. We're on a direct route to f1 there. I can't believe I've just done that. Got confused over which side of the board I was going. It's not even close, unless your opponent forgets which direction they're going. Wow. Let's take the pawn and do something a bit more sensible. f8 is the square I want to go to, not f1. And yeah, we get to f8. Also a study from 1935, also Bahr. So he didn't just come up with a rule, he came up with some studies to say, look how you can use my rule. Let's see if I can remember which way the sides are going this time. So white's going up the board, black's going down the board. It's white to play. It doesn't look good for white. pause the video and decide what you'd do. So like I say, it doesn't look good. You're dropping the A pawn. The reflection from the bishop's diagonal, the bishop's file gives you the diagonal. That the black pawn hasn't crossed A7. It's really not looking good. But what you can do is come to C2, and what you're going to try and do is just get round the back of the black king. So when king B4 happens, you can play king D3, and king takes, and we box the black king in. And we're just going to keep the black king on the A file. The only way that black can wrestle the opposition off you is to play A6, but they've just crossed that diagonal. So king C2 drew the game. Next, how are we doing for time? That's about half an hour, so just a couple more. Yeah, this is a good one, and this also brings in knowledge from, I would say, more basic endgame stuff that we should just know. Yeah, maybe a bit of a clue there. White to play and try and get a win, obviously, because white's got the extra pawn. So from Bahr's rule, the first thing we should note is black as the defending side. There's your rook's pawn back to the bishop's diagonal. There's the reflection. The white pawn hasn't crossed it. If we push the E pawn, it's gone. Basically, there's just nothing that we can do there. So I know E4, play king D5, king F4, king E6, and black's just going to hang around until you let them take their E pawn, and they're going to get their king to C8 really easily. So not that. The other problem you've got is if you just sort of play any old move, like king F4, black just gives up on the E pawn. Okay, so if you play king F4, black just gives up on the E pawn. You push. You get a queen, A2, and I said a couple of times before that strongly recommend this book. It's the Book of Jesus, 100 Endgames you must know. I personally recommend that book. You get to know that pretty well before you even get stuck into all the Dvoretsky stuff. And one of the things it talks about is queen versus pawn. Obviously, queen versus a bishop's pawn, queen versus a rook's pawn. It's a draw unless the white king is in the winning zone, and I think it's worth learning those winning zones. So the winning zone, I mean, you could do it as a geometric shape. That's the winning zone. If the white king's in there, it's a win. Or you can remember it by numbers. And these are the two squares. Okay, if the white king is 2 away from either of those, it's a win. And you can see that the white king is not 2 away from either of those. So this is a draw. If you learn it as numbers, by the way, it's actually it's quite easy to remember, because if it's a bishop's pawn, if the king's the right side of the bishop's pawn, so if it's a bishop's pawn and the king's this side, then you need to be 1 away from there or 1 away from there. Okay. Whereas if it's a bishop's pawn and the king's on the bishop's pawn and the king's the wrong side of that bishop's pawn, I think you then need to be either 2 away from there or 2 away from there. So I think I'm demonstrating that I haven't fully remembered it, but I would strongly recommend learning those numbers. The technique for actually doing it is, you could kind of work that out over the board, I reckon. I mean, maybe practice it occasionally, and you also need to know the extra tricks that the attacking side will try with pins along the second rank against the bishop's pawn if they're not 2 away from those squares. Anyway, the winning zone here is a rook's pawn. We need to be 2 away from there, or 2 away from there, isn't it? Yeah, so this is the winning zone. Sort of just a square with the E5 corner cut out of it. And we're not in it, so it's a draw. So we can't push the e-pawn, and we need to be somewhere where if black then plays king d4 next move, we can at least defend our e-pawn. Like king d2 is obviously very silly. King d2, king d4, draw. But we do need to stay inside this winning zone, because we're going to move our king. If black makes a run for the a-pawn, there's no more king moves. Our e-pawn goes, black's a-pawn goes, and we're gonna see e8 equals queen, followed by a3 to a2, and it kind of gives it away. King e2 is the winning move. If black comes in for the d pawn, we play king f3 and support it, and I mean, yeah, if black makes a run for the b pawn, they're even further behind in that race now. And if they try, hold it up, then our pawn hasn't crossed the diagonal from Bahr's rule, so we can at some stage just abandon our pawn, try and gain as much time as we can, and come and collect the a4 pawn, and we've won. So king e2 was the fantastic winning move there. You could see it play out, I suppose. We'll see the pawn race. Queen a2, and we are in the winning zone. Okay, so I think we're going to come and get a checkmate on. Is it 2 squares from there? Because we're going to play king d2. I said you could work it out over the board. Probably shouldn't work it out whilst you're doing a video. I should just cheat and look at the engine in a sec. Oh, king d3. Wow. Oh, you're going to go the queen versus queen route. I was thinking you could do something where you end up forcing the king to b1, and then you set up a checkmate on c2. That must be one of the options. King 5 check. King b3. Who plays king b3? The engine's saying king b3. We're not doing that. Queen b5. Okay, we're trying this. Queen out. King here. Oh, can we do this again? Maybe I should just do what the engine says. It still wants us to do king d3. I'm just going to do a queen versus a queen win. I'm sure there was some way that you could do I suppose here king b1, it will suggest king d2. There you go. Oh, now it's saying a1 equals knight. Anyway, this video is not about queen versus pawn. I think I've shown that my queen versus pawn needs a bit of sprucing up, but yeah, as long as you know the winning zone, I'm sure you could just sort that out over the board once you get down to it. Right, what about this one? White to play. Pause the video, have a go at it. What's the move that white should play? You wouldn't know this looking at it, but the drawing move is bishop d4. The engine reckons that's like a minus 0.5 slight edge for black, which I think it just means it hasn't seen it to the end. Everything else is like -6, so black's doing pretty well. If black doesn't exchange bishops, so king f2, we might see bishop c1, king takes f3. The engine's just saying 0.0, so I'm not sure where the -half was coming from a minute ago. So yeah, black's best try is to take the bishops and come into f5. You're going to come and attack the f pawn. King e4, push the d pawn, takes, king takes f3. And now you look like you're in trouble again, because king d4, and it looks like you've got to do something about the black king coming to collect your b pawn, so you've got to play king e2. And black hasn't really got too many choices here. I mean, if they tried something like h4, then you can bring your king to d2, a5, a4. That's just a draw. I wanted to say a stalemate there, but that's a metaphorical stalemate rather than a literal one. So black's probable best try, or something that black might get excited about, is pushing the c pawn, taking back. You can see that the a pawn's going. So if you've learnt your Bahr's rule, I mean, you just don't even need to think about it. If I was playing this position now as white, I'd be thinking, I don't even know. I don't even need to look at the diagonal. All I know is this a pawn's going. If this black pawn's there, I've lost. That's just a fact. So I would just play h4 straight away. I'd probably look at the diagonal from Bahr's rule, the reflection off the bishop's file, and go, oh, I've drawn it as well. So play h4 because I have to play h4, and then go and look at the diagonal. I've got a feeling actually. Aren't I right in saying here that even if the black pawn was an a7, we're still okay? Aren't we still okay there if the black pawn was an a7? Because we're hemming the black king onto the a file. They'd have to play a6 to get their king out. So I think we're drawing that with a tempo to spare. Do let me know in the comments section if you think I've said something silly there, but no, I mean, the only way black's going to get their king out there is to play a5. And then we're back to the back and forth business there, and I mean, we're getting to f1 with... That wasn't a move to spare, was it? Not sure what I did wrong there. One final position. This is a game from 1969 where Botvinnik is playing black. Dvoretsky goes through this quite a lot, and it's interesting, it's good, but it's the first bit of it is not really much to do with Bahr's rule. So I mean, White's got their knight pinned to the rook, so black is winning that knight, and there's a big discussion in the book about whether White should play rook d6 check, and it's good, but it's got nothing to do with Bahr's rule, I don't think. So the game continuation was rook d5, rook d2 check, king takes on d3, black push the g pawn. Throughout this, by the way, the engine's just saying 0.0. King came into e3, h5, takes, and we got to this position, and this is the final pause the video for this Bahr's rule that I would suggest. Yeah, pause the video and work out what you should do here as White. Can you find the same move that Botvinnik found? I don't know if Botvinnik knew Bahr's rule. I suspect he did, given he was very much a player who liked rules. He liked chess having rules and principles, didn't he? Sort of in contrast to Tao, so we're told. If Bahr was doing stuff in the 1930s, I would suspect this was something that Botvinnik had learned a long time ago, whilst he was a kid or something. Anyway, what you want to do, if you look, the defending sides, we're about to lose our h-pawn, obviously, and the defending sides, rook's pawn back to the bishop's file, reflection, the black f5 pawn has not crossed that diagonal. So unless you can get black to bring that f-pawn forwards, you've lost. So that's what Botvinnik did. He played king e3, and the idea was that he wants to try and get that black f-pawn forward. If king takes h3, you go king into f4. It looks like king e3 is almost like a mistake in a way, because it's like you want to make a beeline for f1, and king e3 just allows king g3, and it's like black's going to get f4 check in, and they're getting their pawn further up the board, but you want them to get their pawn further up the board. It's sort of a bit, possibly even a bit counterintuitive at first. White plays king e2. There's no point black messing around with king g2. This is the pendulum in action. So yeah, king e2. Black then pushes the f-pawn, and Botvinnik just came to... They didn't do that pendulum messing around, by the way, but they could have done. Botvinnik came to f1 with the king, and we saw takes, king f2, king g4, king g2, and it's a draw. The black pawn has crossed that diagonal. Hope everyone found that useful. Apologies for the marching my king to the wrong end of the board when I made a beeline for F1 instead of F8. But I'm sure that's so stupid that, yeah, I'm sure you can forgive me for that.